Welcome to Miami. Beautiful skies, blue beaches, and terrific cars. Join me at Homestead Miami Speedway in the Ferrari 296 GTB and Thermal Raceway in the McLaren 750S as we find out which one is the better buy. These two cars are over $400,000 and are aimed head to head to take down each other. One is a hybrid and one is a pure ICE supercar. So I'm curious, is the new tech better or is the traditional lifestyle the way to go? Join me for track footage as we see which one accelerates faster and feels better with the handling characteristics. There's a lot to go over, so bear with me. Okay, it's time to get at it. First off, the Ferrari 296 GTB. This is an 819 horsepower supercar with 540 pound-feet of torque. It actually has less torque than the all-motor McLaren. First, let me show you a lap in the Ferrari and then a lap in the McLaren. Then let's compare them to see which one is the better buy. For being a 3-liter, man. here's the deal. I want to break things down with 7 different categories for analysis. First off, we have the chassis, then the acceleration, braking performance, cornering speed, downforce, weight, and feedback. Let's first talk about the chassis. Now, when you imagine a Ferrari being built in Italy, you're obviously picturing a state-of-the-art facility with state-of-the-art craftsmen. And yes, this vehicle looks elegant by every means, but it doesn't have the same level of engineering for the chassis as the McLaren, and it's because it is using an aluminum chassis versus a carbon fiber tub. So the win here definitely goes to the McLaren because not only does it feel stiffer behind the wheel, but when you go over bumps on the racetrack, the entire chassis stiffness and composure feels more like a race car, and more stiff is what you want. There's a reason why in Formula 1 every vehicle has a carbon fiber tub. Not only is it safer in terms of getting into a crash, but also they're stiffer and lighter. Aluminum chassis are prone to chassis flex, and I could definitely feel driving the Ferrari 296 GTB that the chassis simply wasn't on par with the McLaren. I'd rate the chassis for the Ferrari as an 8 out of 10 and for the McLaren a 10 out of 10. There is nothing better than a carbon fiber tub. Secondly, we need to talk about acceleration. These two vehicles are drastically different but very similar. What are they similar with? Well, let me play side by side how fast they accelerate. Which one is faster here? I'm looking at it and I think the numbers are climbing faster in the 750S, but I did have a passenger with me in the 296 GTB, so if you try to average it out, from what I've seen, these vehicles look like they're accelerating exactly the same. If anything, the lower gear ratio of the 750S may have an edge, but then the hybrid nature of the Ferrari will give you more down-low torque. Or will it actually? Because the McLaren has significantly more torque than the electric-assisted Ferrari. Yep, that's right, this vehicle has 50 more pound-feet of torque than the hybrid Ferrari, and it weighs significantly less. When you're looking at acceleration, 2 things cross your mind, or well, they should. First off, power to weight ratio and coefficient of drag. Let me explain both real quickly. Now, you want a car to weigh very little and have a lot of horsepower. Therefore, you have more horsepower per pound. This will show you how fast you can accelerate. But then there's an external factor, which is the air. Picture driving a Ford Raptor R down the half mile. Yeah, that's a brick in the wind. Now picture driving a Lamborghini. You can slice through the air with little resistance or catch all the air like a wall. That would be the coefficient of drag, and I think both these vehicles are very slippery. I think the acceleration win goes to the McLaren here because you don't need to rely on different electronic settings to give you peak power. It's always going to be running at peak horsepower because it's running on gasoline with no electric motor assists. The Ferrari has a mode called qualifying mode, which I had turned on to give you maximum acceleration out of the battery system. However, to get maximum performance for the e-motor, you need a lot of electricity, and electricity needs to be built up or charged. The McLaren doesn't need that. It's always going to be running optimally as long as the cooling is running as it should. So I really do think that the McLaren is a faster accelerating car because the engine itself is more powerful and the car is lighter. You can see right here, they're side by side. So the acceleration win, I'm gonna say, goes to the McLaren. I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10 and the Ferrari an 8 out of 10. Next up, we need to talk about the braking. This is gonna be another really big point of comparison because one car has an electronic braking system. What does that mean? Well, have you driven a new Corvette? They also have them. This is called brake-by-wire, and it's actually an electronic wiring system where when you hit the brake pedal, it's sending a message to the brake calipers to apply the pistons onto the pads to slow down. This means you don't have an actual traditional connection with fluids and more to the braking system of the vehicle. Therefore, the resistance that you get doesn't feel the same. I always try to equate an electronic braking system, a brake-by-wire system, as a little bit video game like. It's because you have to try to learn it. It's different, and I definitely do think when you get into a race car with a progressive brake pedal, versus a vehicle with an electronic brake pedal, it is much harder to finely tune your braking inputs because the resistance that you're getting back out of the system is all programmed. The best way I can describe the braking system out of the Ferrari is that it's very sensitive, meaning I felt when I was hitting the brakes, it was responding much faster than the McLaren. The McLaren has a low sensitivity, meaning if you're going around 120 miles an hour or so and you have a chicane coming up that's high speed, you would want to try to brush off very little speed. Having a low sensitivity brake pedal allows you to hit the brake pedal without having as much instantaneous braking force. It allows for finely tuned inputs where you can push it on the brake pedal at high speed and not have it slow down too fast. This helps to brush off speed for mid to high speed corners. When you want to brake hard in the McLaren, you have to push hard. I feel like the adaptability of a brake-by-wire system allows for a lot of adjustability and flexibility, but to me, I prefer a natural connection that is very progressive. Don't get me wrong, they both brake extremely well, and the braking system of the Ferrari looks very cool. The question is, do you want future tech? Or do you want more of a traditional setup? To me, I prefer traditional. What's really cool about the McLaren is that trail braking happens very easily. Now imagine you're going very fast, 140 miles an hour, and you have a 40-mile-per-hour hairpin coming up. You can threshold brake, which means slow down as fast as you possibly can, but then keep brake input applied but slowly let off as you rack the steering wheel left or right. The idea is to keep pressure on the front end to give you a ton of front end grip to turn and rotate the vehicle. The McLaren is aided by brake steer, which is a form of vectoring for the wheels, allowing the vehicle to pitch and rotate very fast for corners. The Ferrari has an electronic differential, so that's going to be acting in the same way basically as the brake steer would for the open diff of the McLaren. You can definitely trail brake with a brake-by-wire system, but again, you have to readjust your sensory inputs for it. Next up in the fourth talking point is gonna be the cornering. Now, the Ferrari has a shorter wheelbase. It's 2 inches shorter than the F8 Tributo. I love tracking that car, even the 48 Pista on the previous generation platform. When you look at this car, since it is shorter, it feels like you're turning and rotating even faster. It reminds me a bit of the Porsche Caymans, but no, it's not near as short as those. So imagine just a 48 or an F8 Tributo that will rotate a little bit faster because there's 2 fewer inches between the front wheels and the rear wheels. It feels pretty fun and lively when you go corner to corner. So I really do think that the way this vehicle can rotate is very impressive, and I'm really liking it. It feels like the low-speed corners are pretty equal with both vehicles. I want to talk about mid-speed. These are corners that are right around 60 to 80 miles an hour. The Ferrari to me feels like it has a little bit more body roll with the suspension calibration. And when you go into a corner, and let's use this medium-speed corner as an example, I found myself struggling with a little bit of mild understeer. I didn't feel like the tail end was going to kick out, but I didn't feel like it was as planted as the McLaren was with the carbon tub. So for cornering, they're very different. I would say the Ferrari is more lively and the McLaren has more stability because the wheelbase is a bit longer. Next up, we need to talk about downforce. So the McLaren has active aerodynamics with a rear wing that will go all the way up like a plane and then go all the way down to let you cut through the air as fast as possible. The Ferrari doesn't really use that, but it does have a ton of downforce. The active aero system of the Ferrari is different. It's definitely there in the rear, but you can't exactly see it. Do you see the black line right there towards the rear bumper? That is going to be your active rear lip. And it will add about 100 kilograms of downforce, but you need to go at least 155 miles an hour to achieve that level of downforce. It's more of like a gurney flap. It helps to stall the air. The downforce with the McLaren is incredible because on a straightaway, the wing goes all the way down, as you can see here, and allows me to accelerate as fast as possible. Then when I hit the brakes, you'd expect the front end to nosedive and the tail to lift up, but it doesn't. It actually shoots up the rear wing just like they do on an airplane when you're about to land. This gives you a whole new level of stability for the braking zones, allowing the vehicle to feel very neutral and planted. And plus, it looks incredible to watch when you're driving. So in summary, both vehicles do have active aero, which will deploy for braking zones and more. It's just which one is more your style. Number 6, the weight. The McLaren weighs significantly less than the Ferrari. 600 pounds less. That's insane. With a curb weight of 3,060 pounds versus over 3,600, you can feel it. I'd actually equate the weight of the 296 to be very similar to the Z06 I used to own. You're physically trying to manipulate more mass, and it's just harder with the physics to rotate a vehicle like that corner to corner, meaning over time, tire wear, brake wear, even gas consumption would all across the board be higher than a lighter vehicle. For a lighter car, the tires don't need to work as hard, the brakes don't need to work as hard, even the driver. Have you ever driven a go-kart? No? Have you ever driven a pickup truck? The heavier the vehicle, the more resistant it will be to changing the direction of inertia. You can have a car with less downforce, less horsepower, and weigh less, and in the end of the day, due to the weight, you technically have more effective downforce and faster acceleration. What happens to all performance figures when you raise the weight of a vehicle? Well, they go down. Your acceleration goes down. Your effective downforce percentage goes down. The longer wheelbase McLaren feels night and day lighter than the Ferrari. If you're asking how it is lighter, well, using a carbon fiber chassis, they're able to create a structure that is altogether lighter than traditional aluminum chassis. Plus, there are no batteries, there are no electric motors, or other special electric systems to run a hybrid vehicle. I would give the McLaren a 9 out of 10 for weight and the Ferrari a 7 out of 10. Finally, we have feedback. Now this is going to be the way you drive the car. How do the seats feel? How does the cockpit feel? How does the steering feedback feel? We've already gone over the brakes, the chassis, the cornering speed, the braking, the acceleration, the downforce figures, but we need to talk about how it feels. So talking about electric aids, the Ferrari does use an electric steering rack, which means it's going to be programmed through the algorithms to perform as a Ferrari should, which means it doesn't have the natural connection that a mechanical system would have. In the McLaren, you have an electro-assisted hydraulic steering system. Therefore, when I hit a bump on the road or a bump towards the apex of a corner, I can feel any bump and compression through the suspension system. And I can feel exactly where those front tires are, so I can communicate them to rotate and keep fast cornering speeds into corners. When the front end begins to understeer, I can feel it glide more straight than left or right, and the steering becomes a bit more light. There's a distinctive feeling. It's really hard to explain. Let me just put it this way. A traditional steering setup, like we have in the McLaren, feels as natural as stretching your arm. That tension, that feedback is within the wheel. Electric steering racks can offer a ton of performance and feedback, but they're just artificial. You have to decide which one really matters to you. Do you want the adaptability of a comfort steering setup, then switch it into track mode and it gets more stiff? Or do you want the steering to always feel natural, giving you direct feedback from the road? In my opinion, I prefer pure feedback. Also, the seats. I did have the McLaren Santa seats in the 750S, which allowed me to stay perfectly still with the OEM harness bar and 6-point harness system. You're not going anywhere. Driving the McLaren feels more like a race car. It feels like this car came from a Formula 1 racing team. The Ferrari felt more adaptable, something that would fit perfectly in the lifestyle of a Beverly Hills home. I would give the McLaren a 9 out of 10 and the Ferrari an 8 out of 10. Finally, here's how I'll equate both vehicles. The McLaren feels like a vehicle made for the track enthusiast, who is willing and able to drive it on the racetrack. The Ferrari feels like the pinnacle lifestyle vehicle for those who love performance, but likely will never go to the racetrack. And that's actually what I see personally when I go to the track. I see a ton of McLarens. I don't really see Ferraris very often. There's nothing wrong with that personality, and this is why. People love to watch Formula 1. But would you want to be a driver? The McLaren is for those who would like to play the sport, to become the driver. It's a very small percentage. The Ferrari is for those who want to watch and appreciate what the design stands for. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, make sure to like button, really help me out, and subscribe for much more great content coming out your way. Hit the notification bell so you're up to date with all the new videos coming out. I'll see you in the next one.